But let's start where you left off and the importance of art. And could you talk more about the research that you did leading to Proust was a neuroscience scientist, or other current research in neuroscience that talks about the way art affects the brain, whether you're making it or observing it, experiencing it, and particularly the chemistry of artists who can silence the silencers and change the way the mind functions as they're in a moment of creativity.
Yeah. That's a big question. I mean, it's very tough, I think, to generalize about what art does to the brain, because it does so much to the brain. I mean, I think there's so many interesting studies to cite. There's studies showing that when you read a novel, for instance, and you read a sentence about, you read a sentence from Jane Austen about someone dancing, your own brain lights up as if you were dancing. So there's this, I think the first thing to say is that even words, even these abstract symbols, letters on a page, trigger this deep sense of simulation in our brain. So that we light up as if we were there in the dance with Darcy too. So that is one thing I think the arts do, and it's also knowing that that's a skill too. That's not, you can take someone who's never read a novel and put them in a brain scanner, and their brain won't show that same sense of stimulation. That I think there's increasing evidence that sense of deep engagement with the text, and I think these studies, the best studies have been done with language, that deep sense of engagement with the text is a skill that has to be learned and taught and practiced. That I think it's become a bit of a cliche, but I think we are not properly developing those attentive set of skills in the age of the iPhone and Twitter and all the rest. I don't think the internet is the apocalypse and destroying art, but I do think it's one thing we have to be more careful of is that encouraging us to leave the shallows and also how to engage deeply with the stimuli, whether it's Jane Austen or a painting. The second part of your question about the chemistry of silencing the silencers, that's a great line. I think some of my favorite work that touches directly on the neuromechanics of the production of art comes from the study of improv. And this is a bit related to what I was talking about moments of insight and states of relaxation. So these are, again, very simple, elegant studies where you take jazz pianists, they mostly use jazz pianists, and you give them specially rigged pianos so they can play them in a brain scanner because their head can't move, and lots of mirrors and wire and stuff like that. And you compare what their brain does when they're asked to repeat a simple blues tune versus what happens in their brain when they're asked to spontaneously invent a melody of their own making, when they're asked to improvise. And you see two big patterns of activity. The first is they do silence their own internal silencer, so part of the brain called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is a part of the brain important for self-control, important for, helping us not say stupid things, important for us, keeping us focused on a specific task. They turn off that part of the brain. They seem to inhibit it. So, and what the scientists argue is that by inhibiting their inhibitory areas, they're making it easier for them to just throw stuff out there, to not worry about, gosh, is this the wrong note? To not worry about, am I playing something stupid? Is this going to sound ugly? They put themselves in a creative state of mind that makes it easier to simply create. And that seems to be a core part of improvisation, in general. It doesn't matter if you're a stand-up comic or a jazz pianist. You have to put yourself in that state of mind where you allow yourself to express more easily. The second thing they find, and this is a little bit different, is that at least in music, people improvise using the same brain areas. They co-opt the brain areas that we use for language. The same brain areas that let us come up with a grammatical sentence also allow us to, if you're a jazz pianist, work within a specific modal structure, a chord structure, and then improvise within that. So it's in the same way, language is all about structures and patterns, and these are subsurface structures, and then we can invent an infinite number of expressions within grammatical English. These jazz musicians, very cleverly, their brains use that same basic mechanism to improvise musically. So I think these are some exciting studies in terms of if nothing else, they leave us in awe of what artists do every day, of behind the curtain of consciousness. These jazz pianists, they don't really understand the DLPFC. They don't, they can talk about, you got to put yourself in that state of mind where you're able to express more. But if nothing else, this shows us I think the astonishing amount of activity that is involved whenever the brain even creates a simple, and these are very simple melodies in a brain scanner.
Can that be learned? I mean, are there ways, one of the things that you talked about, and certainly the other studies I've read, suggests that the brain is much more plastic than we thought, and in fact can be modified, whether it's giving those 4-year-olds a few tools to change their approach or not. Talk about how that ability to get in the groove, get in the flow can be enhanced in any of our lives, not just artists, but any of us trying to be creative in our practice.
Yeah. I think it's deeply teachable. I think we don't teach it very much. In an age of No Child Left Behind, I think these are skills that are tougher to quantify in a multiple choice test. But I think it's deeply, deeply teachable. I think that's part of why I proselytize on behalf of metacognition, because these are things that take advantage of the pluralism and plasticity of the brain, the fact that simply by thinking about thinking, we can change the way we actually think, and we can become more creative. That said, I think, getting the most out of the creative brain does involve, I think, rethinking some pretty fundamental habits we have in the classroom. So, for instance, daydreaming. In recent years, there's been a lot of research into the benefits of daydreaming. So the daydreaming brain consumes more energy, more glucose, than a brain that's focused on a task. And for a long time, that was a little mysterious. Why would a daydreaming brain consume so much energy? I thought this is supposed to be like the absence of thinking. It's like procrastination. So what is the brain up to? Why is it so frantic and busy? And what seems to be happening in the daydreaming brain is that you're forming long-distance connections across the cortex. So normally you don't see this elaborate conversation between the front and back parts of your brain. I'm oversimplifying a bit, but when you daydream, the very front and the very back of your brain are talking in sync, and so you're exploring and coming up with all sorts of new ideas, remote connections that you otherwise might not, exploring counterfactual stuff like that. So it's an essential thought process. Jonathan Schooler, for instance, has shown that people who daydream more and significantly are aware when they're daydreaming, that they score much higher on tests of creativity. Of course, you walk into any classroom and kids are always being chastised for stop daydreaming. Stop looking at the window. Focus, focus, focus. We assume that the only way to think is to simply focus on a task. And focus is important. Attention is crucial, but so is daydreaming. I think that is a skill that, more than anything else, I think is becoming increasingly hard to preserve in the age of iPhones and little computers in your pockets. Some work done is just done in the UK, but they found that kids actually do daydream less now than they did even 10 years ago. And what the researchers argue is that because now kids get a little bit bored and they simply turn on the television, they play some video games, that they've lost the ability to be usefully bored. Because when you're bored, you learn how to daydream. And so these are skills that can be taught. They're skills we have to practice, but I don't think we're doing a very good job teaching them at the moment. But they are core creative skills. They're not just about arithmetic or spelling. They are the underlying skills that allow us to be creative.
So we should all tell our kids, go be bored. But actually, let's take this to a practical level. Many of the folks in the audience run organizations or manage groups of people, manage large, complex enterprises. What would you say are ways to build in that creative time if you're not Google and can't afford the campus and the ping pong tables and lunch free every day?
Can't afford warm showers in the bathroom either.
Have you seen some simple but practical ways that organizations can help create more of that kind of air in their systems?
I think the research is getting to the stage where they're coming up with a few practical tips. So there's a study that came out last year that compared people solving insight puzzles in blue rooms